Ben Fagan here with another episode of Career Cash, the podcast. And on this episode, I sit down with business consultant at Vensure Employer Services, Mike Urso. On the show, Mike and I talk about building a routine coming out of college, the difference between rejection and failure, and why education is key. It's an awesome conversation. Let's get to it. Well, I am very excited for this episode, and no pressure. We got Mike Urso here, and before we give the welcome, the reason why I said no pressure is because this is episode 50, the big 50, and I got a great guy in store for everybody here. So now getting to the official welcome. Welcome, Mike. How are we doing today?
I'm doing great, Ben. I appreciate you having me on. Congrats on 50 episodes. That's unbelievable.
Thank you.
Excited to be here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm like, you came highly recommended to the show, so I figured, it was lining up nicely with the schedule reaching 50. So I'm excited to get into it. So how I kind of like to start every show, and this is what I do on at the beginning, is to bring context, around to learn a little bit more about what you do on a day-to-day basis, and then we'll kind of go back in time a little bit, how you got there, and then a bit of where you're going. So bring us up to speed on the latest and greatest. What do you do on a day-to-day basis in the work you're doing now?
Absolutely. So I work now for an HR and technology company. We work with small, medium, and even large size businesses on streamlining employee administration, lowering costs around healthcare, workers' comp, and really just overall labor costs, the cost to employ an employee, right? And help to really just find qualified talent as well. Not help necessarily find the talent, but through what we do around our technology, around the benefits that we can offer to different companies, we, in turn can offer Fortune 400, 500 benefits to companies who wouldn't be able to without the help of a company like ours. So I am what's called a business consultant from the perspective of Vensure HR, who's the company that I work for. And so I'm essentially in the sales role now, where, I'm going out to market to find these types of companies who are looking for help around, those items that I had already mentioned. Now the idea of being a consultant, the job very much, even though it's sales, it's very consultative because each company is very, very different. So doing a lot of, cold outreach, warm outreach. I work with a lot of partners, either in the benefits world, the workers' comp world, work with a lot of CPAs, to help their clients. And so the day-to-day is not the same every day, which is much different than it was like me and you were as athletes, where we had a regiment. Very much have to be, very prescriptive about what I'm doing each and every day, each and every week. It just changes a ton each and every day. So that's a brief background on what I do. I did get my MBA in HR management from Lynn, which in turn got me here, at this stage of my life.
No, that's awesome. We're gonna jump into a lot of the different things that you talked about, but one of the things that you just mentioned that it kind of stood out for me to me too was talking about things being so different, from a day-to-day, and then also coming from a very regimented background. I think you don't necessarily have to play sports, but coming out of college too, you go to class, you have a clear-cut picture of what your responsibilities are. And so transitioning into the work that you do now, are you somebody that enjoys kind of the lack of concrete regimen? Have you built a regimen for yourself? What's the approach been to, help you be efficient, effective in the work that you do?
So I would tell you that anytime you start a new job, hopefully you have some leadership around you that's going to at least give you the prescription of what you should be doing, right? And having a leader, and I don't find this a bad thing. Anytime you start a new job, I want it to be micromanaged, at least for the first, 3 to 6 or first 3 months at least, right? So, if you have no clue what you need to do to be successful, right? Let's lean on the leaders and the people at that company that you're working for that have seen that success. And so for me, it was, I can almost relate it to being a freshman on the lacrosse team. Like, if you have no clue what you're doing, what you're supposed to be doing, how do you know what to do? It's looking at the guys to your left and right who have been there and done that. So in turn, you understand the methodology towards being successful. And for me, it's funny when I look back to my first job, which was at ADP, which is an HR and technology company as well. I worked in the small business space selling payroll to my clients. And so in the interview process, which, at the time thought I was doing a very good job, then they hit me with one question that I will never forget, actually. It was, Mike, coming from your athletic background, and mind you, actually, ADP was looking for people who had athletic backgrounds.
Mhm.
So this question came out of nowhere.
Right.
And he said, Mike, with your background in athletics, your whole life has been kind of written out for you from fall ball to summer to spring, and when you finally have season. You know exactly what you're doing on a day-to-day basis from the time you wake up and go to practice or a lift or conditioning to when season starts and you're actually finally at game day. When you transition into this role, what is it going to look like for you when none of that is put together for you? And that was, right away, I was like, wow, what a question. And it was something I was actually somewhat prepared for, because I had asked the question to myself, going out into the work world and always having my whole life kind of written out, around sports. And so I actually handled the question, at least how I would see it, very, very well. And it really all just was based off of work ethic and drive, and how, to be honest with you, athletics is the reason that I'm going to be successful in a sales role, in this career, in this job, because of the amount of work I've had to do on a day-to-day basis, and the amount of work that has to be done outside of what's regimented and written out for you that you have to do on a day-to-day basis. If you really want to be successful in sports, you know this, Ben, you can't just go to practice and expect practice to be the thing that gets you there. You got to put time and effort in outside of practice. You also have to put time and effort into school. So what did that look like? What did my grades look like? How successful was I in the classroom? Which, yeah, sure, I have classes, but no one tells you when to get your work done. No one tells you, when you have to do your homework, right? It's, you do it or you don't. You have to find the time to do it, or else you don't do well. And so, that was a funny question that actually came up to me, and it is a hard transition, to be completely honest with you. It just makes you think differently, and you've never really been creative around, time in general, right? Time spent and where to spend it, because everything has always been prescribed for you. And so I think when looking at the transition itself and coming from, an athletic background in college to the work world, it really had to do with work ethic and being creative about, where I was going to spend my time. And so, but I think having the athletic background actually helps.
Yeah. And so when it's easy to see, I think, in athletics, all right, you want to get better, go to the gym, go to practice, spend time, training, whether it's the batting cages, the backfields, whatever it might be. Right. And that's a very, easy thing to see. But when you get into something like the working world, sales, whatever it might be, what does that training look like? What does your extra work look like? Because like you mentioned, you can't, to be successful, it's not just, showing up to practice or not just showing up to work. So what does your practice, your training look like for you to be successful in sales and the work that you do now?
Yeah, it all goes back to one time spent and being very methodical about what you're doing. And so I think, one, having the mindset of I'm not going to fail, which absolutely comes from being competitive and having an athletic background helps, is the reason, or is going to be what motivates you to put that training in and the effort in behind learning what you're going to be doing. And so when I transitioned from ADP to Vensure, which, to give you some background, I was selling just payroll to small businesses, companies anywhere from 1 to 50 employees. And it's a very simple process when it comes to payroll. I can meet with a client on Monday and have it closed by Friday, or even quicker sometimes. When I transitioned to Vensure, who we're a PEO, or part of what we do is called a PEO, which is a professional employer organization. we actually co-employ with companies. So what that really means is that from the perspective of the IRS or, any form of like an auditor, they would see the employees as being co-employed with Vensure HR. So when that is a huge learning curve, because it's now no longer just payroll. They're co-employing with us to have access to the resources that we have, like our buying power for benefits, to lower some of those costs. They are also utilizing our workers' comp insurance that we're basically extending to them. And it's our policy, but they have their name on it. And then as well as around HR outsourcing in general and being an HR consultant, because the other thing that we do is, since we co-employ with companies, we actually take on a lot of the liability that's associated with, not owning, but hiring an employee. So even things like lawsuits around, EEOC or FLSA and some of the other things there, we actually take liability on a lot of those things. And then as well as like benefits administration, which I'm not going to get into the whole back office and how it works, but it's very cumbersome when it comes to an employer who has to offer benefits to make sure that they're in compliance. And so we take all of that on. So the learning curve to understand, just payroll when it was on the business owner to understand these functions. Now I have to understand the functions of owning a business. So in turn, I can then, be the right partner for them to make sure we can take on what they need. And so for me, it was like first 3 months of the job, not even first year of the job, was like breathing through a fire hose. I found success there, and thankfully quotas ramp up year after year. So you have no choice but to get better each year, right? So first year was absolutely breathing through a fire hose. Had a good background on what I was doing, just because my family in general has been in the space for quite a while. So my brother actually works for the same company as I do, and the family's just been in it for quite some time. And so I had a, general idea, but didn't understand everything. And so there was definitely, it was not 9 to 5. It was, 7:30 to 8. And when you're in your first year and you have clients who want to talk after 9, you've got no choice but to answer the phone or to give them that call or what have you, because you're in your first year. You've got to, almost relaying it back to being a freshman, you got to, put in the time, put in the work, and show that you're here to stay, in order to, to find the success, and then also get help and buy-in from everyone around you that says, all right, Mike's in it, he's staying here, he's been working hard, all those things. So I think there's, a huge learning curve, and you just got to put the time in to be able to learn what you're doing and perfect your craft. We have a training program at Vensure, but when I first started here, we didn't really have a formalized training program. So I just leaned on my leader quite a bit for the knowledge piece, what I needed to learn. And then, each night making sure I know everything there is to know about the space that we're in, and how to consult on it.
So how'd you handle that, such a steep learning curve? I know you mentioned, leaning on your leader. What did that look like? What were those conversations like when you're like, hey, I don't know how to go about this. This is information that I don't know. Where can I find this? And like, how did you go about catching up and getting to the place you are now? I'm sure are going to continue to grow, but where you're at now.
So that's always a tough conversation or a tough topic, just because your leader, they're there to lead you and to help you, but they're also busy, right? They have a whole team to manage and make sure that they're on the right track. But in reality, if you're not asking for more, if you're not going out and asking your leader day in and day out, hey, I need this, hey, I need that, I want to learn more about this, I want to learn more about that, that's what they're looking for in their hires, in their reps. They want someone running at them really, really hard, saying, hey, I need this, I want this, this is where I'm trying to get to, right? So one, it's, defining your goals, making sure your leader knows what your goals are. But two, just like never being afraid to ask for that help, the things necessary for you to be successful The reps that don't make it, or the hires that don't make it, are the ones who think they absolutely know everything and they're, just good the way that they are, and they're going to go out and be successful. Never seen one of them be successful in this world or at this company. I've seen a lot of people come and go. I have a coworker of mine who, me and her have been here together for the last 3 years together, and we both have just seen people come and go, and we laugh with each other about some of the names and faces that have come through. And honestly, it really is that. It's like, who is willing to work, who is willing to ask for help, who is willing to put in the time that it takes to be successful here. And the ramp up in this industry in general it takes a long time. So if you're not, begging for help, you shouldn't be begging, because your
Right.
leader should help when you ask. But that's the mindset, is like, don't be afraid to ask, even if you think you're inundating somebody. This is your life. You want to get better. And also, they hired you for that reason.
Mhm.
So let's go out and let's make sure that we, lean on our leader. And I used to just throw time on their calendar, Ben. I mean, I'd be like, cool, here, we're going to talk about benefits for a whole hour. I'd be like, cool, you have a little tiny block, I'm stealing it. Sorry to whoever needed it.
Right.
Because that's my time. I need that time. So it's really just not being afraid to ask, tough questions, make sure you're getting the help that you need.
Yeah, and how did they respond to that? I know it differs, leader to leader, person to person, but when you would, take that initiative, what was their reaction to something like that?
I had the best leader I could have ever asked for. Unfortunately, she's no longer my boss, and this is probably a representation of just who she is in general. She's now an SVP of our sales enablement team, so she's like 3 rungs higher than where she was when she was initially my leader. She was tasked with opening up the market of South Florida, or Florida in general. So for her, it was a very easy answer. It was, yes, of course, I'm going to help. And for me, it was like, I had the all-American of HR and technology consulting helping me out and making me great each and every day. So the knowledge was there from her, but 2, the ability to help was there, and 3, the desire to help was absolutely there too. So it was very, very easy for me to get the help that I needed.
That's a beautiful recipe right there for success. I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
So the all American of sales, I like that. So what you mentioned something earlier about not whether what I'm not quoting you exactly, but not accepting failure, and working towards that. And in something like sales, where you mentioned the cold calls, the warm call, all these things, I imagine you run into a lot of rejection, a lot of no's, a lot of this. And so what in your mind is different between rejection and failure?
Oh man. The difference between rejection and failure, they're completely different. I mean, for me, failure is, in a sales role at this company, I would say failure is, 1, not meeting the number, but more importantly, not making it to what we call our President's Club. So we have, if you're at a specific percentage of plan over quota, you get a company paid trip each and every year. So I think it's 115% of plan and above, if you're, eventually your quota gets higher and higher. So they actually have an automatic qualifier number 2. So if you just hit that number, you're good to go, which is where I'm at now. I need to hit that number. That to me is failure. So hitting my quota is great. But I'm not, I don't want to hit my quota. I want to go above and beyond. I want people to see that, Mike Urso is doing well, right? He's at P Club every single year. That to me is success. The rejections are going to come with success even too. The whole idea behind sales is that you get better from each rejection. So when it came to, my leader who's instilled even these thoughts in me, everything actually comes down to a metric. So in sales, you start out with calls, right? You have to get appointments in order to close a deal, right? You have to have someone to sell to in order to close it, right? So you have, call metrics. How many calls does it take me to set up an appointment, right? And then it's, all right, what behaviors can we drive to make sure that Mike can get better metrics when it comes to calls? How do I go from 20 calls to 1 appointment that equals 1 appointment to 10 calls that equals 1 appointment, right? And then it's diving into that. The other piece in our job that's the hardest part of our job is what we call document collection. As you can imagine, we have to underwrite for benefits, underwrite for other insurances. And so in turn, we got to collect all of these documentation from these clients who, when they answered the phone 2 days ago, all they thought that they were doing was taking a meeting. And now they're giving us pages and pages of documents that takes time for them to collect. So how do we go from, that appointment to then document collection? All right, I had 5 appointments and I got 2 sets of docs. That's okay, right? How do we get it better? All of those things. So it's even looking at metrics that then can make you more successful. And without the rejections, without the no's, without the blatant just non-responsiveness from some of the prospects out there, you're never going to get better at what you're going to do. So you have to be very prescriptive about each and every activity you're doing, how you're doing it, looking at the failures that you've had, and then what you can do to make sure you learn from them so that you have more opportunities to win in the future.
That makes a lot of sense. And on this kind of road and journey to reach and surpass your quota that you're working towards each year, I'm sure that the path is littered with a lot of things that are out of your control, right? To who picks up the phone, who doesn't, how quickly, your clients are turning around these documents, all these things. So when you're in an environment where there's a lot that is out of your control, what do you control and what is important for you to look at so you can balance between the turnaround of maybe the client being slow on getting the documents. I can't do that, but what can I do? How do you balance those things?
How do you balance what you can versus what you can't do, the
Correct.
controllables,
Yeah, the
basically?
controllables. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
balancing it is, at least for me at this point, is fairly simple. You can only control what you can control, but sometimes there are things where maybe you think you're dead in the water, but in reality you're not. So funny enough, in this sales world, there's we always call them breakup emails at Vensure. So for that prospect that hasn't gotten back to us, that hasn't spoken to us, right? Like, what do you do? And most people would just be like, you know what, I'm done. I don't want to talk to them anymore. They're not being responsive to me. I might as well drop the deal, mark it dead, and call it a day, move on to the next. But we have these breakup emails, which for whatever reason, you'd be very surprised. Sending one of these emails can actually get someone kind of back in the door. It sounds something like, hey, Ben, last time we spoke, you were looking to streamline employee administration. Your benefit costs were through the roof and you're becoming, unaffordable. And, not being, or in that labor lawsuit that you had last year is still kind of lingering. Would love an opportunity. I know you spoke to me about those things, and I'm just here to help if you need them. Is that still going on today? Right. Instead of saying, hey, Ben, are you still interested in what we have to offer? Right. There's a way to formulate it. And typically, funny enough, people will come back and go, you know what, Mike, you're right. That is still on my mind. Let's have a discussion tomorrow. And so that happens quite a bit. But I think managing it all is, sometimes you do have to walk away and say, whatever, move on to the next, and continue to just make sure you're doing the front end work of, building a pipeline of clients you can work with, and just not being afraid to lose a deal. You definitely can't be afraid to lose a deal, even though it does sting sometimes if you get far enough through it.
Now, going back in time a bit, we'll hop in the time machine here. Going back in time, what got you interested in this field? I know you said your family has been in this space, but why HR for you, and why this field?
So one, I knew I wanted to go, well, I'll even back up. I went into criminal justice when I went to a school before I went to Lynn. They actually had, the FBI used to recruit right out of there, and so did the Secret Service. And so I was like, all gung-ho about, going into a criminal justice program at that school. And then when I transferred to Lynn, they transferred all of my credits over. I decided to finish out the degree. But I knew in some way, shape, or form, I wanted to go into sales. Have a very outgoing personality. Definitely, I don't know if you've ever done a DISC assessment, but very D&I driven. And definitely a great fit for me in general, just as who I am as a person. I'm actually, funny enough, not money driven, even though I work in a sales job, which is very interesting. Most people are. But the HR side, when I went to Lynn and had an extra year of eligibility and had the opportunity to do my master's, I was like, well, if I think I'm going to go into this industry, it would be very helpful for me to get my, HR degree. And I ended up loving it. So I got my MBA in HR management. And then out of school, I was told by my father to go work for ADP if I could do it, right? If I could get the job. And so or really just worked for a payroll company as a start, So I interviewed at a few companies, got offered by ADP, went and worked for ADP, and it was an amazing experience. Gave me amazing sales training. Was able to think about partnerships and referral opportunities and how to drive, those sort of partners. So kind of outsourcing your quota mindset, not having to trying to find ways to duplicate yourself as a sales consultant, not having to hit the phones every single day, but having stuff just kind of come in, right? So that I learned a lot from ADP about that. Learned a lot from ADP about getting on the phone, and just working hard. I mean, payroll, the deals are a lot smaller, so you need much more of them in order to kind of hit your quota in that world. And so I was basically told to go work for a payroll company first and then see, where it took me. Little did I know that my father told me to do that, knowing I might get burnt out at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the HR background and because I'm always trying to ask for more. Eventually in payroll, I just felt like, I needed more. I needed to learn more. I needed to do more. The days got, even though each day is different, I was doing the same things each and every day. And every client was kind of the same. And so then I transitioned to Vensure. So that's kind of how the transition went for me. It was like, you should go work for a payroll company. Did kind of got, a little bit, just felt like I wasn't doing what I was qualified to do, so to speak, or what I could do. And so I moved over to Vensure.
And do you think that was an important step to take, working for the payroll company first?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's actually given me a much different perspective on what we do here, because most of the people I work with at Vensure have only been in the PEO industry their whole lives, or careers. They came from a benefits background and then made their way to PEO or Vensure. But having the payroll background, since we're an HR and technology company and not just a PEO who co-employs with people, I have the opportunity to consult on really anything. So I can work with small to medium-sized businesses with just payroll. I can work with small to medium-sized businesses on just benefits. I can work with large companies on payroll. So like very large upmarket 1,000+ companies, 1,000+ employee companies for just payroll. So it gave me a great foundation to kind of understand what goes into running a business on the back end when the owner has the liability and exposure associated to hiring employees or having employees. And so it gave me a great background, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
And so how many years were you at ADP before you made the transfer?
I believe just over a year.
Mm-hmm.
I think I
Yeah.
started right before the like quota season started, or the quota year started, and then the quota year started, and then I think I just maybe finished out the year.
Mm. And that's what this is where I try to practice, take some my own medicine, practice what I preach here, is that idea of patience, where you spent a year doing, taking this step in that direction, which laid, it sounds like it laid such a strong foundation for you for the work that you're doing now. And I think that's always, especially coming out of school and, still something, like I said, I continue to work on, is that idea of, okay, gain the experience, take that step, invest that time to build a stronger foundation for when you get to, the next step, for you. And so what was your experience with that in mentality? I should say, is how did you view that step or that time at ADP? Was there a timestamp saying, hey, I'm going into this for a year, I'm going into this 2 years, just kind of be open, see where it leads? Did you have a time marker on you? How did you approach that as a stepping stone?
So I didn't even approach it as a stepping stone. For me, it was going to be a career.
Mm.
Some of the people who work for ADP and even some of my old teammates who, are still there, make very good money, and sell quite a bit. Their quotas are really high, and they crush it in each and every year. So ADP is the type of company that you absolutely build a career around, and you could stay there for your whole entire life. Sure, you can move over to different products or markets within the company, but for me, it was never an idea that I was going to move over to Vensure and start a career in HR consulting, um, or even go into the PEO industry at all. So for me, I thought I was really going to be having a career there. And it is the type of company that if you play the waiting game, if you're patient enough, good things will come and be fruitful for you in the future. You could build the right partnerships that continue to keep on giving. You'll just continue to crush it year after year. But for me, I wasn't really driven off of the partnerships piece. I wasn't driven off of, just having someone send me a deal, me creating a sales order, and then getting this client into implementation to start with us. For me, I really enjoyed the idea of consulting on HR, using my degree, using my background, and really just helping clients with picking the right solution that works for them, other than, just trying to fit them into a very specific box that sometimes not everyone can fit into. And so, now I have the ability, instead of like putting someone into the box, I'm, forming the box around them and offering them exactly what they need.
You might have just touched on it too, but as you said, you're not primarily driven by money. So what is it in the work that you do that really excites you, that gets you going, that you find really meaningful?
Yeah. So for me, I have a very interesting situation, Ben, where one, my brother works for Vensure. But two, my father actually works for Vensure too, and he's the chief sales officer. So when he started here, and I believe it was 2017 or 18, he was tasked with growing out an organic sales team throughout the country. And so he's been in this industry for quite some time. He's worked for many of the large players in the industry, or most of them. And he has quite a bit of a following when it comes to this industry and just people knowing his last name. So for me, it's almost like I have a target on my back. Can't fail because of the name type of thing. And then as well as just wanting to be just great at everything that I do, right? So I want people to reach out to me and ask questions and know that Mike's a resource or the person to reach out to for whatever they may need. And it's definitely turned into that over the years, which has been a great experience. Rather than, first of all, in sales, you can't find success unless you're putting up the numbers, right? You have to back it up, right? So there is no, he's doing well because he got helped. Well, I'm sorry, from start to finish, you can't close a deal unless you can do it on your own. So for me, that's a big piece of my I can't fail. And then as well as, I can't tell why I'm not motivated by money, but what I can tell you is that if you're just driving the right behaviors for the right reasons, the money comes no matter what.
Hmm.
So, and that's going to be in any role that you're in, whether it's sales or, a typical salaried job that doesn't have commissions. If you're driving the right behaviors and you're doing the right things day in and day out, and then you're asking for more, you're going to then in turn increase your W-2 each year.
Hmm.
So that's really how I think about it. I don't need to think about everything from like a dollars and cents perspective on each deal or each appointment, but I know there's people that do that. And that is a great mindset to have as well, because those people don't want to see the dollars fall down the drain.
Yeah. And ultimately it comes down to, what works well for you. Like you just mentioned with mentality, it works well for some people. The approach that you take, obviously is working well for you. And that's another important, thing to be conscious of is learning from all these different people, taking the things that work for you, trying the different approaches and ideas, but not necessarily saying, oh, this person does it, I've got to do it the exact same way. I think that's always an important piece. And that I do want to get your perspective on that too. Is with the family and with your dad being in this industry, how have you been able to kind of build your own path and your own approach to the work that you do?
So really just there's a handful of people I lean on
Mm,
that I've either grown with since I started here or I've gravitated towards throughout my employment here. Um, and you know, some people I just simply like won't let go. For example, my old sales leader. Um, you know, I'm still reaching out to her. I'm still getting time on her calendar. I'm still trying to ensure that I can, you know, hear the things she has to say. She's now oversees basically all of the training at Vensure for both leadership and for, you know, business consultants at Vensure. And so I'm always trying to get in her ear, understand what, you know, she's thinking, continuing to learn from her. You know, there's, you know, other leaders within our company that, you know, I also lean in on quite a bit. Our new AVP of Florida is someone who I'm leaning on quite a bit, really within, you know, the leadership aspect of sales, and he is amazing at that. You know, our director of sales nationally is a person to lean on anytime it comes to like, oh man, how do I even? He's just a great people leader. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
mhm.
You know, he's so good at getting people motivated and understanding who uh, he's good at understanding who is going to make it and who maybe isn't going to make it, depending on
Mhm.
the behaviors that they have. He's got those. He's that type of guy that'll give you a call on a Friday to see how you're doing, just to kind of hear your voice, type of thing.
Mhm.
So I lean on him quite a bit. And it's funny, me and my dad, we don't really speak at all about work.
Mhm.
We actually don't. We actually don't
Mhm.
speak about it at all. It was one of the prerequisites to me coming to work for Vensure, was that we're not gonna talk about work. You know, my success is my success and my failure is my failure. And there was a chance that maybe I didn't cut it here, you
Mhm.
know. So we don't really talk about work whatsoever. And then there's, you know, my colleagues that sit. There's really one person that sits next to me every single day who, you know, you have to have a rock at work, someone that you talk to each and every day that either one is driving you to be better, or two is just there for when things aren't going great. And so Venture's gone through a huge evolution over the last 3 years of changes. We were part of the first organic sales team in the state of Florida. So as you can imagine, the last 3.5 years, we now have 4 or 5 different markets in Florida altogether. And we're just, you know, one of those markets, and we're in all 50 states. We're, you know, about 4 to 5 thousand employees, maybe even larger. And so there's been a lot of changes. So, you know, leaning on people that are on your team that are successful, leaning at people outside of your team that are successful. And so I think that's kind of how I drove, you know, the right behaviors to be successful here.
No, definitely. Now, the $1 million question here, looking forward, what's that look like, moving forward, as you're obviously an incredibly highly driven person. So has any thought been given to that? And if so, what does it look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, um, I've really gotten big on the education piece of this industry. I've realized that there's so many gaps that people have coming into it, that, you know, either people have a benefits background or they have a workers comp background or they have a payroll background, and to decide that they're going to learn all the other things that they didn't know before starting here, uh, is a very hard feat. And so I am huge into education. I love coaching. I've coached lacrosse ever since I left Lynn. I coach right next door at St. John Paul II High School. I coach, you know, club ball, and I really am into, you know, education, but too just leadership in general. And so I'm hopeful, you know, here soon or in a year or two to go into leadership at some point, and to be able to help others drive those behaviors and characteristics that, you know, make salespeople great in our company. Um, other than that goal, you know, outside of ventures or anything I've really thought about doing, not really. Really love the company that I work for. Don't see myself doing anything else anytime soon, or jumping to the next level without it being just internally at Venture. And so I'm hopeful to go into leadership at some point in the near future, which would be the goal for me.
That's awesome. And I never a doubt here coming from my end for you there. So I'm excited to see that would be one heck of a team to be on. So now as we're coming to the end of the show, it's time for us to cash out where you leave us with your most valuable piece of advice, your biggest tip, lesson learned along the way. So what do you have for us today?
Oh man. I would say that in everything you do, strive to be the best. That may not be the case. You may not ever be able to be the best at something very specific, but if you really are motivated enough to be the best at something, you will make sure that you go ahead and do that. Now, whether that's to be the most knowledgeable, whether that's to be the hardest working person, right? I think anytime you have set a goal for yourself to be the best at something, or at least just a small aspect of your life, you'll be very successful. So for me, it was education. It was, I'm going to be the most knowledgeable, educated person within this industry. I'm still not even close to being that person. But it's gotten me very far to have that mindset that I am absolutely going to learn the most and faster and quicker than everybody else, so that I can ramp myself up. I think there's always, when you're young, there's always the idea that you're young. But in reality, age is just a number. If you can make sure that your behaviors and the things that you're saying and doing on a day-to-day basis are what's going to drive your success. So for me, it's just having the mindset that you're going to be the best at something, and then rewriting the prescription or the goal that you have to go ahead and do that.
I love it. I love it. The work ethic, the drive, it permeates through the screens and the speakers, and we'll reach far. So Mike, I can't thank you enough for coming on. This is awesome. Great to hear that you're crushing it, and like I said, not surprised. So I appreciate you.
I appreciate it, Ben. Thanks for having me, and congrats on 50.